When you picture Orange County, or the OC, if you grew up on early 2000s television, you imagine sunburnt beaches, immaculate shopping plazas, and a level of suburban polish that feels engineered in a lab. But beneath the coastal gloss lies the Irvine family, a clan whose discipline, land strategy, and reserved influence built the backbone of this region long before reality shows tried to claim it. And their development playbook shaped the actual ground underfoot in the city that carries their name and helped lift Orange County overall into one of America's most envied enclaves. In today's episode of Old Money Empires, we'll take you through the farmlands that became master plan neighborhoods, the agricultural grid that evolved into meticulously organized suburbs, and the family whose decisions quietly steered Orange County's future. Before Orange County became shorthand for luxury SUVs and master plan calm, it existed as a patchwork of ranchos, the largest of which belonged to the Irvine family. The Irvine Ranch spread across roughly 110,000 acres, running about 23 miles from the Pacific Ocean inland toward the Santa Ana River. That single holding covered nearly 1/3 of the land that would later be carved into cities, suburbs, and freeways. From coastal bluffs to inland valleys, the ranch formed a continuous estate that gave the family an unusual level of control over how Southern California would grow. The Irvines treated this land not as a short-term asset to be chopped into quick sales, but as a long-horizon project where timing, infrastructure, and agriculture all had to move in sync. Wheat, cattle, citrus, and lima beans cycled across the soil in carefully chosen rotations, each crop matched to the soil and climate instead of fashion or speculation. Their decisions created a landscape that could later support not just housing, but schools, parks, and what would become the signature SoCal lifestyle. In 1959, when the University of California began scouting sites for a new campus, it chose a coastal rise on the Irvine Ranch, anchoring the area's future in higher education as well as real estate. That campus would grow into the University of California, Irvine, a research institution that now enrolls more than 36,000 students and ranks among the country's leading public universities. The family also donated land that became Irvine Regional Park, giving Orange County a public green refuge long before open space became an urban planning buzzword. As decades passed, the ranch name extended from fields and orchards into corporate letterheads through the Irvine Company, and later into municipal identity, where the city of Irvine incorporated in 1971. Today, the Irvine Company controls well over 100 million square feet of offices, apartments, shopping centers, hotels, and marinas, primarily in coastal California. At the center of that private empire stands Donald Bren, whose fortune of roughly $19 billion as of late 2025 makes him reportedly the richest real estate developer in the United States. Yet, even that modern fortune rests on decisions made first by a 19th century immigrant who arrived with no land at all. The story of how one of America's most valuable ranches came into being begins far from palm trees and Pacific sunsets. To follow the money back to its source, we have to trade Orange County's beaches for the cold winds of 19th century Ireland. James Irvine was born in 1827 in County Down, in what is now Northern Ireland, into a Scots-Irish world shaped by migration, tenant farming, and the constant search for more secure ground. He entered life well before the potato blight, but by the mid-1840s, the Great Famine had upended Ireland, driving millions to uproot their lives in search of food, wages, and stability. In the midst of that upheaval, Irvine left for the United States in the mid-1840s, most likely in 1846, landing in New York as a young man with minimal resources. And while James Irvine's transatlantic story is dramatic enough, some of the other dynasties we research come with chapters so messy they'll never see daylight on YouTube. Those go straight to our free Substack, which you can join through the first link in the video description box below. Now, James's first American job was in a paper mill. Hardly glamorous work, but it offered a wage, a foothold, and the chance to accumulate the first modest savings of his future fortune. But he did not stay in New York long. By the late 1840s, he joined the human tide moving toward California and the gold rush, but he chose his role there with a sharper eye than most. Instead of digging for gold, Irvine became a merchant, supplying miners with food, tools, and equipment that would prove valuable whether anyone struck a vein or not. This choice gave him a steady income in a chaotic environment and allowed him to build capital while others gambled on ore that often refused to appear. He put his profits to work in San Francisco, buying real estate and aligning himself with the city's emerging business class as California shifted from frontier to permanent settlement. By the 1860s, he stood among San Francisco's more prominent businessmen, the kind of figure invited to big deals rather than left watching them from the sidelines. One of those deals linked him to the Flint and Bixby families, powerful stockmen who controlled vast grazing lands in Southern California. They formed partnerships that included sheep-raising operations in Monterey County and then extended into Southern California ranches that would later become synonymous with the Irvine name. Together, Irvine, the Flints, and the Bixbys held interests in ranchos covering enormous tracts of land, including properties that would become central to Orange County's geography. In 1866, their group acquired Rancho Lomas de Santiago, rugged and hilly terrain that had served as a sheep ranch under William Wolfskill's ownership. While many 19th century landowners rushed to subdivide and sell as settlers arrived, Irvine kept his focus on cohesive holdings and steady production. The turning point came in September 1876, when he bought out his partners for $150,000 and took sole control of roughly 110,000 acres that became formally known as the Irvine Ranch. He gradually shifted the focus from open-range cattle herds toward crops such as citrus and lima beans, which aligned better with the local climate and the growing markets of the American West. He saw the ranch not just as grazing land, but as an integrated operation where water systems, planting decisions, and transport routes had to support each other. By the time James Irvine died, the once fragmented ranchos had coalesced into a single estate in private hands, ready to be more tightly organized and developed. The groundwork for one of California's great land dynasties had been laid, but it would fall to his son to turn inherited acreage into a corporate engine. And as the 19th century closed, the Irvine Ranch was waiting for an heir who could ride its boundaries by day and restructure it by night. James Harvey Irvine II was born in San Francisco in 1867, the American-born son of an immigrant who had gone from paper mill worker to land baron within a single lifetime. His childhood was marked by loss as well as privilege. His mother died when he was 7, and his father died in 1886 when James was still a teenager. The ranch initially passed into trusteeship, but James grew into his inheritance and eventually took control in his mid-20s. He did not manage the ranch from a distant office. He rode across it on horseback, sometimes covering 40 miles in a day, inspecting fields, livestock, and infrastructure in person. In 1894, he incorporated the family holdings as the Irvine Company, shifting the estate from a pure family trust into a corporate structure that could make contracts, borrow, plan, and expand with more flexibility. Under his leadership, the ranch continued to emphasize profitable agriculture, citrus groves, bean fields, and other crops that matched California's climate and the demands of regional markets. He invested in water systems and land improvements that made the property more productive without slicing it into the kind of haphazard subdivisions seen elsewhere. By the early 20th century, the Irvine Ranch had become a symbol of both continuity and potential, a massive holding that could support generations of farming, or in time, entirely new types of communities. James Irvine II died in 1947, leaving behind not just land, but a company that was structurally ready for a new era of planning and development. That era began to take shape in the late 1950s, when the University of California looked to build a new campus in Southern California and turned to the Irvine Ranch as a potential home. Los Angeles architect William Pereira began drafting concepts that combined a university campus with a surrounding city, a rare chance to imagine both town and gown at once. His early ideas included a radial plan centered on artificial lakes and a university hub, a kind of futuristic inland resort integrated into a campus. Those first plans evolved, and the campus site shifted to the southern coastal hills, but the core idea of a linked university and planned city survived. The revised approach resembled a necklace, with distinct villages strung along two major parallel boulevards and the University of California, Irvine acting as the pendant at their meeting point. In 1960, the Irvine company hired planner Raymond L. Watson, who became instrumental in translating these drawings into real neighborhoods, roads, and commercial districts. Each village had its own housing styles, schools, places of worship, and shopping centers, surrounded by broad arterial roads designed for car travel, very much in line with mid-century America's love of the automobile. Commercial districts framed the community at its edges, with the Irvine Business Complex to the west and later the Irvine Spectrum to the east, creating employment and entertainment zones bracketing the residential core. Irvine's planners incorporated large landscape buffers, extensive use of reclaimed water for irrigation, and utility corridors that doubled as bike paths, parks, and greenbelts connecting ecological preserves. Over time, portions of the historic ranch received protection as parkland and natural open space, forming one of the largest networks of urban-adjacent preserved lands in the country. By the 2020s, the city of Irvine had grown past 300,000 residents and had picked up national attention as one of the safest and best planned cities in the United States. In 2025, real estate research from firm Zonda went further, naming Irvine the best planned community in the nation, a title rooted in ideas first sketched on paper in Pereira's office. Yet even as planners and executives reshaped the land, a new figure inside the family began asserting herself in ways that would change the company's internal balance. Because no matter how orderly the master plan looks from above, every dynasty produces an heir who prefers to push against the blueprint. Joan Irvine Smith, born Anita Irvine on the 1st of July 1933, grew up as the only child in the direct line from James Harvey Irvine II. Her father died when she was just 2 years old, and her grandfather's death in 1947 left her with a minority but meaningful stake in the Irvine Company. From a young age, she lived in the shadow of a corporation built atop family land that she partially owned but did not fully control. She attended Westridge High School in Pasadena and spent time at Marymount College and the University of California, Berkeley, moving in circles where business, culture, and civic life constantly overlapped. By the early 1960s, she had gained a reputation as a shareholder who was both informed and unafraid to challenge decisions made by the company's board and its professional managers. In July 1962, she filed a lawsuit accusing the Irvine Company of mishandling a land transaction that swapped a large parcel in Orange County for agricultural acreage in Imperial County. The suit, announced with fanfare at San Francisco's Mark Hopkins Hotel, sought compensation for what she believed were losses to herself and other family shareholders. This move signaled that she would not be content as a passive heir. She intended to press the company as forcefully as any outside activist investor. Yet her influence reached beyond corporate disputes. Joan became a crucial supporter of the decision to locate the University of California, Irvine on ranch land, and she engaged with university leaders on the campus's role and direction. Her concept of a directed imagination, discussed in conferences and planning sessions, encouraged university and civic leaders to blend creative vision with practical implementation rather than treat them as opposing forces. UCI leaders have acknowledged that without her advocacy and involvement, the campus might never have taken the shape, or even the location, that it occupies today. Her philanthropy extended into medicine through the creation of the Reeve Irvine Research Center, dedicated to spinal cord injury research, and inspired in part by actor Christopher Reeve's accident and recovery struggle. She remained active in arts patronage and equestrian circles, tying the Irvine name to cultural and sporting life in addition to land and buildings. Over time, she became one of the last direct descendants to retain meaningful influence over both the Irvine Company and the Irvine Foundation, even as ownership structures continued to shift. Her passing in the 2020s symbolically closed the period when the Irvine family itself stood near the center of the corporation that bore its name. The assets would increasingly be shaped by someone who had no blood tie to the founders, but whose ambition matched the scale of the land they left behind. And that is where an outsider from Los Angeles steps in and treats the Irvine legacy as a canvas for his own multi-billion-dollar blueprint. Donald Bren was born in Los Angeles in 1932 into a family that operated closer to film sets and civic boards than to ranch house kitchens. His father, Milton Bren, served in the Navy and later moved into Hollywood film production, while his mother, Marion Newbert, became a prominent civic leader. Their divorce in the late 1940s gave young Donald a first-hand grasp of shifting family structures and the need to chart his own path. He studied business administration and economics at the University of Washington, combining classroom theory with an athlete's focus sharpened by high-level skiing. Bren aimed for the 1956 Olympic ski team before an injury forced him to pivot to other ambitions, a turning point that redirected his drive from the slopes to the marketplace. He served in the United States Marine Corps, where he absorbed a culture of discipline and chain of command thinking that later carried into his approach to real estate. In 1958, he founded the Bren Company and began building homes in Orange County, earning a reputation among lenders and buyers for solid construction and consistent execution. By 1963, he helped launch the Mission Viejo Company, guiding one of California's early large-scale master plan communities and refining his ability to think in terms of entire towns, not just streets or subdivisions. Those experiences prepared him for the deal that would later define his career. In 1977, Bren joined an investor group that bought the Irvine Company for approximately $337 million, acquiring roughly a third of the shares at the outset. Over the next several years, he increased his ownership through a series of transactions, and by 1983, he controlled around 86% of the stock, giving him effective command of the company. Through continuing purchases and negotiations, he eventually bought out the remaining minority shareholders, transforming the Irvine Company into a privately held firm. Under Bren's leadership, the Irvine Company reinforced and extended the master plan approach initiated by Pereira and Watson, but applied it across offices, apartments, shopping centers, and resort-style communities. The Irvine Spectrum rose as a regional destination that mixes retail, entertainment, and workplaces, while neighborhoods like Newport Coast brought high-end housing onto former ranch land with sweeping views. Today, the company's portfolio spans more than 120 million square feet of real estate, with hundreds of office buildings, over 100 apartment communities, dozens of shopping centers, and multiple hotels, marinas, and golf courses. Bren has also become one of California's most influential land conservation patrons, ensuring that roughly 57,500 acres, around 60% of the historic Irvine Ranch, remain protected as an open space and parkland. These preserved areas include trails, canyons, and coastal hills designated as natural landmarks, forming a vast open space network beside one of the most densely developed regions in the country. His philanthropy has directed more than $1.3 billion toward education and environmental causes, including the endowment of over 60 academic chairs within the University of California system, with UC Irvine as a major beneficiary. UCI itself has grown into a campus with well over 120,000 freshman applicants in recent cycles, a total enrollment north of 36,000 students, and a reputation as a leading research institution. Within the city that grew from ranch diagrams, Bren's presence is visible in corporate logos, preserved hillsides, research centers, and quiet plaques on campus walls. The Irvine family may no longer run the company that bears their name, but their original land empire, reshaped by generations and then by an outsider billionaire, continues to dictate how Orange County lives, works, and builds wealth. And somewhere between those preserved canyons and glass office towers, the old money of the Irvines and the newer billions of Donald Bren keep rewriting what luxury means in Southern California. And with that said, we'd love to see you in the comments. Are you a native of Orange County or SoCal in general? And what do you think of the city of Irvine's planning? We look forward to hearing from you below. We're enjoying doing these SoCal history videos. Again, I'm a graduate of UCLA myself, so Always a lot of love to see you all in the comments. Go Bruins. And with that said, we appreciate you joining us for another episode of Old Money Empires, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.